And now I'd like to welcome to the channel former MLB All-Star pitcher Dave Dravecky. Hey, Dave, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Kyle. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we obviously, as we just discussed briefly in background, there's obviously a big story of your career and how it ended and all the things that have happened after. But before we get to that, I want to go back in time. I want to go back to where it all started. So let's start with the draft, the 1978 draft. The Pittsburgh Pirates drafted you, and then you go off on this little toil in the minor leagues. So kind of just tell me about going into the draft, and then when you get drafted and you're in the minor leagues, kind of what that was like for you.
Yeah, it was, well, first of all, being drafted was, a boyhood dream becoming a reality, at least the first leg of it, because I was now a professional baseball player and overwhelmed by the reality that I was in the Pirates organization, and Youngstown, Ohio is only an hour and 15 minutes from Pittsburgh. So the hopes of getting to the big leagues with the Pittsburgh Pirates was huge. And then to be that close to home. And so the excitement was amazing. And I think you understand, coming from Youngstown, the opportunity to get drafted was very surprising because it's not a baseball area.
Right.
It's known for its football. And so to be selected in the 21st round by the Pittsburgh Pirates was just an incredible experience for me and my family, by the way. And I remember, when I went to sign the contract, it was Murray Cook was the farm director at the time. And by the way, a little note on Murray. Murray's the guy that does all the major events now internationally for Major League Baseball. So he's the one that set up, the London experience for MLB.
Right.
But anyway, I go in to sign my contract, and I look on the contract, and there it is, $500 a month. And I thought I was rich. I was like, this is amazing, man. I'm getting paid to play baseball, and I could care less if I got paid. I just want to try to get to the big leagues.
Right.
And so for $500 a month, I signed that contract and said, here we go. And, the next 3 years were just an incredible experience in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. So I really enjoyed when I signed. I went to Charleston, South Carolina. Billy Scripture was our manager at the time, and he was a big item in Sports Illustrated. He was the manager back in the day that chewed the cover off of a baseball. And so he was one tough hombre. And I remember we signed this kid, and he was like 6'6", 6'7". I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now. But he was also a really good snow skier and just missed making the Olympic ski team.
Wow.
This kid was really athletic. And I'll never forget when he joined us. I think we were actually in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And the team that I was playing for was, as I said, in Charleston. So we're playing in that league. I can't remember the name of it, but it was the Philadelphia Phillies. And I remember this kid coming to us, and he was a pitcher, and we went to the bullpen, and Billy Scripture said, okay, I want to see what you got. And we went down to the bullpen, and all of us were intrigued by the new kid on the block. And he gets on the mound, and Billy's in his, catcher's position, and he's got his catcher's glove on, but he's got no equipment on. And he looks at him and he says, give me your best fastball. And then he throws his glove away. And the kid goes, there ain't no way. Put your glove back on. I'm not going to throw you my best fastball. He said, kid, throw me your best pitch now. I'm the manager. Throw me your best pitch. I could see this right now as I'm telling the story. So he rears back and throws a fastball. Billy just puffs up his chest, and the ball bounces off his chest. We're all standing there going, we don't want to mess with Billy Scripture.
Wow.
So that was my first year in the minor leagues. But what was so cool about Billy was that he was a player's manager, man, and he loved the kids, but he was tough. Mm-hmm. He pushed us hard. He wanted to get the best out of us. And I was so grateful for that. We also had a pitching coach that was a rover, because back then we didn't have a regular pitching coach on staff.
Right.
And his name was Harry Dorsch. And I'll never forget Harry Dorsch. Harry would sit in the bullpen with us. He'd love coming to South Carolina because he would get those boiled peanuts. And he would sit in the bullpen and just chomp on them boiled peanuts. And he'd share them with us. You go, boys, you want some boiled peanuts? And so one night we were sitting there and he said, look, I'm going to give you my philosophy on pitching. And it goes like this. Every pitch is a pitch of purpose. You got to go after them. Be a tiger out there. And make sure you get in their kitchen. And last but not least, drink your 6-pack after the game, not before the game. Like, oh, what have I just signed up? I mean, this is so amazing. So had just a great time in my first year, as you can imagine, with a manager like that and a roving pitching coach. And Harry was German, and he had this very deep German accent. So it was just a delight to be around them.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And I was just going to say, so to start off that way was just incredible. And then I came back and got married, and I married the woman of my dreams. And then we began the journey together. And I think that was the most important thing for me to be mindful of. It was not my journey, it was our journey.
Right.
And so the next year, out of spring training, I broke with the AA team, which I felt really fortunate to do. Get up the next rung on the ladder. Steve Demeter is our manager in Buffalo, New York, where we played at Old War Memorial Stadium. And I got some stories about War Memorial Stadium. Drew McCauley was our shortstop, and just a dear human being. I absolutely love this guy. And he just recently, over the past year, passed away, which just broke my heart. But I'll remember a game at War Memorial Stadium. They called it the Rock Pile. And he was playing short. And a guy hit a routine ground ball to him. And it hit a rock. And it popped him right in the mouth. And it just busted up his lip really bad. And I was like, oh my gosh. Drew, he looked a mess. And then we had Rick Lancelotti. I mean, with a name like that, he's got to hit home runs.
Right.
And we called him Pico Rico. Where we got these names, I'll never know. We also had Chick Valley at first base too. But Rico, he hit, I don't know how many home runs he hit that year, but down the right field line, it was like, I don't know, 290 max, but they had a net that went from ground level all the way to the roof. So I can't tell you how many he hit out of War Memorial Stadium. And if you remember, the history around War Memorial Stadium was that's where O.J. Simpson actually broke the 2,000-yard record in that stadium, in that football/baseball stadium.
Right.
So there we are in Buffalo, War Memorial. And I'll never forget, I was there for 2 years, so 79 and 80. And then Jan and I in 79 with Jan went to Winter Ball in Colombia, South America. Rude awakening. We thought we were going to a tropical paradise. We were in an industrial town called Barranquilla, and there were 7 Americans on the team, and I was having a really bad time. And my wife would go to the games, and here's this tall, beautiful blonde in the stands. And when I'm on the mound doing bad, they're looking at my wife with a finger like a gun pointed in the neck, just going,
wow. Wow.
What are we experiencing here? And then I had Steve Demeter as a manager, and Steve would keep coming up to me and go, Dave, you got to put more effort into it. And I would look at him and go, Steve, I'm putting as much effort as I can. He said, well, it doesn't look like you even care. And he said, Steve, I care more than you can imagine. I care so much. And when I would watch my delivery, when I finally was able to see it in film, I knew what he was talking about. It looked like I wasn't putting any effort into it, but I was putting everything into it. Right. And God, you know what I discovered? I discovered that that was the most deceptive part of my delivery and being able to get guys out with an 88 miles an hour fastball.
Right.
And so, anyway, I'll never forget what Steve said as I left Double A, went to spring training in Triple A in 1981. I will never forget Steve Demeter making this comment. You know, I want to encourage you guys to remember one thing about Dravecky. You might as well just wait and call him up to where he's playing May 1st, because prior to that, he stinks. and he was absolutely right. I could not get anybody out, but in May, all of a sudden, it would click and my rhythm would come in. And I mean, I worked hard in the off season. Right. I worked hard enough in spring training to find rhythm. The only problem was I was always the top 5 worst in spring training before the season started. And it just took me time to get it cranked up. And for whatever reason, May 1st came along and man, it was lights out. And so anyway, that's just a little bit of the experiences with the Pittsburgh Pirates after signing to become a professional baseball player, right, with the hopes and dreams of being a Major League Baseball player.
Okay, so then in 81, you mentioned it, you got traded to the Padres. So kind of tell me, like, what was that like, understanding, you know, it's professional baseball and you're still young and you're going to a new team. So obviously you hadn't developed, I guess you had developed some relationships, but obviously that's got to kind of be a shock, I'm guessing, to be traded to some other organization and have to start anew, basically. So what was that like, getting traded to the Padres?
You know, at first, to your point, it was really hard because I had good friends in the Pirates organization. And obviously didn't know anybody in the right. Padres organization. And it was at the end of spring training. So I really didn't even get a chance to bond with whatever team I was going to be with. And you need to know, I was at the AAA level in spring training with the Pirates. And I'll never forget, you know, hearing Murray Cook say those words, "We've traded you," because I was so disappointed. Mm. You know, they were trading me away from the team that was closest to my home. And that would have been icing on the cake to be in the Pirates on the major league roster and be that close to home. But you know, when Murray said, "We've traded you to the Padres," a couple days earlier, I had just had a conversation with some teammates and we were talking about where would you want to play if you didn't play for the Pirates? And one of them said the Padres, and they said the reason why was because AAA was in Hawaii. And so we all kind of thought that'd be awesome. So when he was standing in front of me and he said, "We've traded you to the Padres," it was so hard to hold back a smile because all I'm thinking is Hawaii, here I come. And he tells me I'm going to Amarillo, Texas. I was like, where on God's earth is Amarillo? And then somebody said, "Well, it's in the panhandle of Texas." I said, "What is the flipping panhandle?" I had no clue, you know, so off I go to Amarillo, Texas. And I have to tell you, at first, it was really scary, to your question.
Right.
New organization. I was being traded from an organization that didn't want me. You know, you have those feelings all the time. You know, when you're traded from someone, it's like, you don't want me, you don't like me.
Right.
But then you get to the other organization and you think to yourself, well, they may not have wanted me, but these guys did. So, okay, now I'm there, and they put us up in the Howard Johnson Hotel. Never forget this. And I enter into my room, and there's another guy in my room. So it's got 2 beds, you know, and we're roommates. And his name is Byron Ballard. And we ended up calling him Bigfoot because the dude had like a size 15 or 16 foot. He couldn't find a pair of baseball spikes that would actually fit him. So he would buy the biggest pair he could buy. He'd slit the toes, stick his foot in it to stretch the leather, and then put shoe goo on the top.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
So I meet this kid, Byron Ballard, and he is very different. And he comes from the Yankees after winning 17 games. And he's now in Amarillo, Texas. And I'm coming from Pittsburgh after 13 wins and I'm in Amarillo, and we're roommates. So we become fast friends. And as a part of that, what's been so cool, Kyle, is that, I mean, I look to Byron today as a very important figure in my life because of my faith journey.
Sure.
It was there that Byron challenged me to read the Bible, to discover who I was in relationship to God. And as I went on that journey with him, he was there every step of the way. The thing that actually nudged me to want to do what he was challenging me to do was I was watching his life, and I saw somebody that was very different from me. He was a baseball player, and when he strapped that uniform on, he wanted to win. And he'd get frustrated when things weren't going well, and he didn't like losing. But there was something different about the way he handled all of that. There was a sense of peace in this man's life that was very different. And for me, everything was about winning and losing. And if I lost, my value was in losing. I was valued as a loser instead of a winner. And so the opposite would be true. If you win, then you're valued as a winner. And so this emotional roller coaster of highs and lows in a game of failure can be extremely destructive. And I saw peace. And
interesting.
well, I wanted what he had. And by the end of that summer, my wife and I were making a decision to follow Jesus and to acknowledge our sin and to repent and put our trust in him. That part of the story is profound in Amarillo, because what ended up happening was I was experiencing the same transformation in my own life. And I was more at peace. I wasn't completely at peace, but I was more at peace, which freed me up to become the best version of myself instead of the fear of losing or winning and how that was going to happen and defining me. It was about now going out there and just being the best version of me and letting the results fall where they may, because a lot of that I had no control over. I ended up 15-5, Kyle,
right,
which was absolutely incredible. And here's why. There was a man by the name of Eddie Watt that was our manager. And this guy loved 25 players really well. He knew the value of creating chemistry by bringing teammates together with their wives and girlfriends and families. So his wife, Betty, Eddie and Betty, when we were at home, would put on potluck night, because they knew that if we could gather these guys together, number one, they're going to get more food than what they get away from a potluck because of our income. You just couldn't buy a lot.
right.
Therefore, you couldn't eat a lot unless you went to Whataburger every night, and that wasn't going to be good for you anyway.
Right.
So he would gather us together, and we would have multiple options on what to eat, and we would laugh and have the best of times. And it was so cool. And what he did was he built chemistry away from the ballpark by bringing us together, and we actually started enjoying one another and liking each other. So I don't ever recall any conflict that year. And we were studs. I don't know how well we ended up doing as a team, but as a starting rotation, one of the best ever in the Texas League, and it may still stand. The record that year, at least up to that year, was 46 complete games by a starting rotation in the Texas League. We shattered that record and had 64 complete games that year. I don't know how many I had, but it was in double digits.
Right.
And it was the most incredible year. And that man taught me the art of pitching. He also was the inventor of the cut fastball. Nobody knew what it was back then. And he said, I'm going to teach you a cutter. He said, Dave, most professional people in the business will call this a true slider. But I'm going to tell you, this is a cut fastball. I used it, and it got me a long way. I'm going to teach it to you because this is going to be your bread and butter. He said, you got a great sinker. You don't have the velocity, but you got movement. Now we're going to show you how to move that four-seam fastball by cutting it. And he said, then what we're going to do is we're going to have you take pitch. We're going to take velocity off the cutter, and we're going to take velocity off the sinker. And you're going to have 4 pitches out of 1 pitch just by the seam, holding the seams a certain way,
right,
and then changing speeds with it. And oh my gosh, He taught me the art of pitching. And it was the most fun year in Amarillo. And, getting to be minor league pitcher of the year. And needless to say, the transition from Pittsburgh to Amarillo went extremely well. And we bonded as a team and as friends really fast. And so I forgot about Pittsburgh, as I moved into being a Padre relatively quickly.
Okay, so then the following year, June 15th, 1982, you make your major league debut. So I know in talking to so many different baseball players through the years, I'm actually in Texas. So hearing you talk about that, it's funny because the Round Rock Express, which is Nolan Ryan's team here in Austin, the suburb of Austin, I've gone to those games through the years, and I've talked to different players and listened to their stories of being called up. And it's really some interesting ones where the coaches are, they're totally coy and they don't tell them about it. And it's like a surprise. So kind of tell me about what your call up experience was like, getting the call and then actually living it out.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was a little unique because I ended up getting a phone call. So I wasn't even with Doug Rader. I had gotten to AAA. We were in Hawaii. I'd been there for about 6 weeks. And June 6th, I get the call from my wife that she's about to give birth. And so I hop on a plane from Phoenix to Honolulu, and I miss the birth by 20 minutes. And so I get home, and, the next morning, after seeing Jan, I go back to the apartment. The next morning, I get up to go over to see her and my daughter, Tiffany, our new child. And I'll never forget, I thought to myself, Jan's a real stickler on me making the bed before I leave the house. So I'm going to go back and make the bed. So I went back and made the bed in our little studio apartment. And as I was getting ready to walk out the door, the phone rings. And it's Bob Cluck, the farm director for the San Diego Padres. He said, "Hey, Dave, I just wanted to call and say congratulations on the birth of your child." And I thought, "Oh, Bob, thank you so much." I mean, it really was a positive expression of the Padres caring more about their players than just what they put on the field.
Right.
And so after he said that, he said, "I got something else for you." I said, "Well, what's that, Bob?" He said, "You're going to the big leagues." I said, "What?" He said, "You're going to the big leagues." I said, "Bob, knock it off." He was a practical joker. And I said, "Bob, please don't mess with me. I mean, this is serious." He goes, "Dave, you're going to the big leagues." I said, "Bob, stop. Don't do this." He said, "Do you want me to call somebody else?" I said, "No, are you serious?" He goes, "Yes, you're going to the big leagues." I said, "Bob, Jan's just given birth, as you've acknowledged. Can I have a few extra days?" He said, "Well, let me call Jack McKeon and I'll get right back to you." So he calls Jack, calls me back. He says, "Well, if you want to play in the big leagues, son, you'll be there tomorrow. Sorry." And so I said, "Okay." So I went to the hospital and I told Jan, I said, "Babe, we've got some news." She says, "What's that?" I said, "I just got called up to the big leagues." And she started crying. And they weren't tears of joy. She was so upset. She goes, "What are you going to do? You're going to leave me here? And I've got this little baby? How am I going to get everything taken care of and get to Sandy? This is nuts. This is not good, Dave." I'm like, "Honey, this is what I've dreamed about my whole life." I said, "We're going to the big leagues." She was like, "Okay." And so anyway, 6 days later, she follows. But I get to San Diego, and I'll never forget, I have this vision of a yellow cab dropping me off at the ballpark, and I have my duffel bag. And I go into the stadium. They get me into the stadium and into the clubhouse. And I get greeted by a few people, I think. I mean, my memory of this is just so vague.
Right.
Because I'm on cloud nine. I'm like, I can't believe here I am from Youngstown, Ohio, and I'm in the big leagues. This is nuts. My dream has come true. I may not be the next Sandy Koufax or Vida Blue, who were my heroes growing up, but by golly, I'm in the big leagues. And so now I get to go out there and I get to, well, wait a minute. I'm pitching against big leaguers now. Oh my gosh, can I get them out? And so all of a sudden I'm running through this tape in my head as to whether or not I even belong there. And I'll never forget the first 2 weeks of my career. It felt like every guy I faced was Babe Ruth, and I couldn't get him out. And I will never forget what happened that turned the tide, because I was so scared, Kyle, being in the big leagues and wearing that uniform and not knowing whether or not I was good enough for this. And I came back, we were in LA, and I came back from the game that night, and my wife and daughter, Tiffany, were at the hotel. Here's this little newborn and my wife, and she greets me at the door. And when I go in, she looks at me and she goes, Dave, what is wrong with you? Ever since I met you here, you don't talk. You've lost 11 pounds. What is going on? And I remember, Kyle, for the first time in my life, looking at my wife and saying, hon, I'm scared to death. And I don't think I can get any of these guys out. And she looked at me and she said, you know, I want you to hear this. I didn't marry you because you become a Major League Baseball player. So I could care less if you stay a Major League Baseball player. But I want what you want. She said, you know, I want you to think about this. Why do you think they called you up? I said, well, because they liked what I was doing. She said, exactly. She didn't call you up because you were Sandy Koufax, Dave. They didn't call you up because you were Vita Blue. They called you up because you were Dave Dravecky. So why don't you just go out there and be the best version of Dave Dravecky that you can be? And trust your stuff. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, guess what? They'll send us back to Hawaii. It's not that bad. And I looked at her and I said, oh my gosh, you're right. I don't have to try to be somebody I'm not. Because I was trying to be Sandy Koufax and I'm not Sandy Koufax. I'm trying to be Vita Blue and I'm not Vita Blue. And so I'll never forget, for the first time in 2 weeks, I went to the bullpen hoping that the phone would ring and they would call my name. Up to that point, if it rang, I hope they didn't call my name. But that night, I hope they called my name, and they did. And that night, I almost got my first win. And I'll never forget, Luis De Leon came in after I pitched and shut down the Dodgers, gave up the tying run, and he ended up getting the win. But that night was the turning point in my career, and I was actually able to get guys out. And here's why. Because along with what my wife said, Clyde McCullough, the bullpen coach for the San Diego Padres, went over Dick Williams to Jack McKeon because Williams wanted to send me back down, and he was tired of my act. And he went over Williams and went to McKeon and said, Jack, give me the kid for 2 weeks. That's all I ask, and I'll straighten him out. And I only knew this afterwards.
Interesting.
But Clyde would sit there. And when I would get up in the bullpen, he said, get up, I want to see you pitch. He'd stand behind me, Kyle, and he wouldn't say a word. Say, okay, you're done. Yeah, do it again. Okay, you're done. And I'm like, what does this guy know about pitching? He was a catcher. So all of a sudden, the third or fourth time I got up over that 2 week period, he goes, okay, give me your good fastball. And I did. And he goes, did you feel it? I said, feel what? I said, did you feel it? I said, well, you mean the pop in the glove? That thing? He goes, yeah. Did that feel good? I said, yeah, it felt great. And he looked at me and he said, son, all you got to do is repeat it. And I was like, you just want me to do it again? He goes, yeah, do it again. And he goes, did you feel it? I go, no, I didn't feel the same thing. He goes, well, what do you think was wrong? I said, well, the ball was up and away. I felt like I was out too far and something was off. He goes, yeah, you were rushing. He goes, so, hey, slow it down. So he says, now, do it again. So I got on the mound, slowed it down, boom, exploded into the glove. He goes, did you feel that? I go, yeah, I sure did. He said, Dave, that's all you need to remember. Keep it simple. It's about feel in this game. He goes, by this time, mechanically, you should have everything you need to have to throw a baseball the right way. He said, we may need to tweak a few things, but only in the context of whether or not you're rushing the ball to the plate. So now just go out, feel it, and repeat it. And the rest is history.
That's incredible. I mean, because I listen to stories and then you think back, like there's those moments in time where something changes, like you might have been sent down, and it's just moments in time that change the course of events. It's really cool to hear how that transpired for you. So let's go to so that first season, Dave, 5-3, 2.57 ERA and 105 innings. You were combined starting and relief pitching. So then we go to the 83 season, and you're a starter only that year. You started really strong. You went 11-4. You made the All-Star game. You pitched a couple of scoreless innings, struck out George Brett. And that season, you started 28 games. You finished with a 14-10 record and 3.58 ERA. So kind of besides that All-Star game, kind of give me the highlights of that 83 season, because obviously that first season in 82, you established yourself. And then 83, you make the All-Star game. You have a really solid ERA, 14-10 record. So kind of talk to me about that 83 season.
Yeah, the 83 season was amazing. I mean, I was shocking myself getting out of the chute as quick as I did, because as I told you, in spring training, I'm in the top 5 worst. And then I break camp and things are going really well. To be honest with you, I don't know a lot of details of the 83 season, but I was so excited to actually get to the All-Star game.
Right.
And TK and I got to the All-Star game. So what I do remember about prior to the All-Star game was just the consistency that I was able to pitch with,
Right.
which was always a priority for me. So I always wanted to go out and win. But one of the things that I learned when I was pitching, and Tony Gwynn actually helped me with this, and it wasn't directly through conversations with him. It was overhearing conversations he was having with others. And I'll never forget him saying, you know what? The most important thing for me in the game of baseball is consistency. Be consistently good. And so for me, being consistently good was trusting in my ability. And he said, when I went out every year when I started the year, I knew that I was a 300 plus hitter. So during the course of the year, I never sweat an 0 for 4, an 0 for 3, a 1 for 4, a 2 for 5. I knew that I would hit 300 plus every year because I was consistent enough and talented enough to do that. And so I thought to myself, okay, I want to win. Tony wanted to win. But what is my focus now when I step out on the mound? And I knew that the key for me, more important than anything else, was to finish a game. And so my work ethic in 1983 was really, really good. And I built my work ethic around endurance. And so I did a lot of running, building up my lungs, making sure my legs were strong. Gyms were not a thing back then,
Right.
Kyle. And so going into the gym, they'd always look at you. Norm Sherry, look, what are you doing? What are you going in there for? And so I actually was able to get a doctor to write a script so that I could go in and lift weights because I was hypermobile. I had too much flexibility. And they said that I would long-term have significant shoulder issues if I didn't tighten the muscles around the joint in order to give me strength enough to not do damage to anything around the shoulder.
Interesting.
And case in point, Jake Peavy, having to have the labrum readjusted and shrunken down to push down on the shoulder in order to keep that joint secure. And so I got permission to go into the weight room. And so that work ethic around the weights and around the running was huge for me to have enough endurance to go 9 innings and not be tired. And so as a result of that, every time I stepped on the mound, I wanted to finish. And the next thing from there was, Dave, you take your club into the 8th inning regardless. Because when we get to the 8th, we've got the closer that's in the Hall of Fame. Okay, so that was my goal. And it worked. In a lot of those games, I took our club into the 7th inning or into the 8th inning. And I got some complete games out of that. And so as a result of that, going into the All-Star game, it was so cool to represent the San Diego Padres in the All-Star game. But I went there and I had the same thoughts I had in 1982 when I got to the big leagues. What is a kid from Youngstown, Ohio doing in an All-Star game? And I walk in there and I see Johnny Bench and I see Pete Rose and I see Pedro Guerrero and I see Fernando Valenzuela. And then there's my buddy Atlee Hammaker. And we had met just a few years earlier, and it was so good to have somebody that I knew at the All-Star game. Mm-hmm. And so we spent a lot of time together talking and just hanging out. And then I remembered going into the game. And so one of the most vivid memories I have. So I loved striking out Freddie Lynn, and I loved striking out George Brett. But I faced Jim Rice. And Bruce Benedict was the catcher from the Braves in the All-Star game that year, and he was behind the dish when I was pitching. And I'm standing on the mound waiting for his signal, and he calls for a changeup, Kyle. And I don't have one. And I'm like, what do I do? Well, okay, I'll grab it with 4 fingers, and I'll try and take a little bit off. And so I did, and it was right down the middle. And Jim Rice hits a ground ball between third and short and gets a base hit. And that was all the damage that was done. And I was so grateful. But I told Bruce after that, I said, hey, buddy, I just want you to know I don't throw a changeup. And he looked at me and he goes, it's obvious, Dave, that you don't throw a changeup. And so that was my memory then. I do recall I started to struggle in the second half. I think it was 2-5 or something like that. And obviously, coming into the big leagues for a full season for the first time, I didn't realize how much endurance I would need. Right. And so it just reminded me, you got to work a little harder if you want to finish a lot stronger, because I didn't finish very strong that year. Still grateful for the 14-10 and anyway, yeah.
Well, so then we go to the 84 season, and I just was curious because you went back to working as a starter and a reliever. So what was that like, that transition? Because I was a pitcher in high school, and I was a starting pitcher. So there's that mindset, like that's what your job is, that's what you do, that's what you focus on. And you had done that the previous season. So then you go to 84 and you're kind of switching between the two. So what was that like for you to kind of switch back and transition back and forth between starter and reliever?
Okay, Kyle. So this might be somewhat controversial to make this statement, but a pitcher is supposed to pitch. It doesn't make any difference whether you're asked to relieve or start. And so that was my approach going into every year. And so when I hear people talk about, well, he's slotted to do this, and the reason why he can't do this is because he's slotted to do this, that's a bunch of baloney in my humble opinion. Right. Now, it's the way the system works today, and I'm nowhere near the system. And so it is what it is. But for me, going into that year, when Dick Williams and Norm Sherry came to me and said, hey, we want to use you in both roles, I looked at my manager and my pitching coach and I said, whatever you need me to do, I will do. And so I'll never forget 1984, because that year I was selected on the all 1984 team as the swing man, as a pitcher. I'll never forget that. And so when that season started and they said that, my work ethic went towards that. And so I knew if I was going to be used differently, then the endurance had to increase. I knew that the weightlifting had to be maintained. And so when I went in and I did my weights, I never missed. And my routine was always to be careful not to go in when there was a possibility of throwing and doing anything heavy, but only doing it for maintenance, only doing it to stay loose and get the blood flowing. Because you got to remember, being hypermobile, lifting weights was not going to cause me to tighten up. If anything, it was going to take me to a normal place where I could then go out there without any pain. And so it was probably the most fun year that I have had in my career because of the fact that I was able to do it and do it really well. But Dick Williams was really good at using me. And he was aware that when he used me a lot, he would give me a break. And that was huge for me.
Right.
So I'll never forget having a start going 7 innings. And all of a sudden, Norm would come up to me the next day after doing my hard run, my flush, and going into the gym and lifting. Then he'd go, look, on our bullpen day tomorrow, Dick wants me to hold off, have you hold off, because if we need you, we're going to have to call on you. And I said, no problem. I'll hold off on my bullpen. And when he gets past that time frame he wants to use me, then let me go down and get my work in.
Right.
And so, man, I got to tell you, that was, like I said, that was so much fun. Took a lot. Looking back on that year, remembering that year, man, it took a lot out of me.
Mm-hmm.
But oh my gosh, that was just incredible because obviously, Mr. Kroc passes away and the season is dedicated to him. We get to the World Series. We go up against the best team in probably one of the top 5 in history.
Mm-hmm.
That year with the Detroit Tigers, but to be in the World Series as a young organization and, dedicating it to the owner who passed away was just an incredibly special experience for all of us. Also really scary because when the series was over and we were getting ready to go home from Detroit, never forget, there was a family bus and a team bus. And a bunch of people in their excitement with the Tigers winning the World Series came over to our family bus and tried to tip it over.
Oh.
And there were people in it. And so they ended up calling in the mounted police. And we had about a dozen mounted police escort us all the way to the freeway from the stadium. So, hey, when your catcher, who's 6'4", 245, says, this is scaring me, man, I'm like, I'm scared too. But we got home safe and everybody was happy. And I learned that the losers get a really nice ring too, Kyle. And actually, it's one of the rings that my son wants when I die. So,
oh, that's interesting. Really?
Yeah,
interesting.
really cool. Yep.
Okay. So that season, which was really interesting to me, Dave, you had a 9-8 record, an ERA of 2.93. So then we fast forward to the following season, 1985, which looked like statistically that's your best. You had 31 starts, you go 13-11, 7 complete games, 2.93 ERA, the exact same ERA as the previous year. So I was like thinking about that like the chances of that happening are just so incredibly remote by the actual number, 2.93. So talk to me about that 85 season, because obviously, 7 complete games. You talked about your endurance. That was interesting talking to Brett Saberhagen a few weeks ago. He talked about the same thing about endurance and pitching complete games. So talk to me about that 85 season, because it was really a solid one and you had the same ERA as you had the previous year.
Yeah. Kyle, I have to apologize. I don't remember much about 1985. I mean, based on what you've just told me, sounds really good. I mean, with the complete games, one of the things that I loved during that era, and especially having someone like Dick Williams at the helm, because I had so much respect for him as a manager. He would blast me in the paper, but he knew psychologically that would really piss me off.
Right.
And he knew that I would want to prove him wrong. And he actually wanted me to prove him wrong, which is so cool about the guy
Right.
when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew how to do that to those who could embrace it that way. But he also knew I don't need to do anything with this guy, because I don't want to tip him off the edge. And so that year, what I loved about that era was that Dick Williams let me work through tough innings. He built my confidence by saying, I want you out there, bud. I know you can work through this, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that. And so that year was so much fun. Again, not knowing many details. Man, for me, the greatest thrill of all for Dave Dravecky was every season that started, whether I remember it or not, I was able to throw on a big league uniform once again for 162 games. And I was so grateful to be out there and to be participating with 24 other guys with the opportunity to be able to get to the World Series another year and to do it with a group of men that on the field you trusted, you respected, and you knew that we all had the same goal. And that was to win enough games to get us into the postseason. And that was the challenge every year. And to do it with those guys, obviously away from the field, we had our cliques. It happens. I mean, regulars don't like hanging out with pitchers. We're goofy. We're just a weird bunch of guys. And the normal guys are even weird, And so we did our thing, and the regulars did their thing, and the utility guys did their thing, and the Latin guys did their thing. And, and every now and then we would get together and we would have a great time together. And especially when we were in the clubhouse, what was so cool was how we got along and how guys teased each other and, dug at each other. And it was all done in love. And so when you go out there and you strap that uniform on and you cross the line and you do it with your brothers, it's just an amazing experience.
Right.
And so 1984 was just another piece, 1985 rather, was just another piece of that experience. And I must say this, if I'm going to say anything about 85, I was growing up. I was maturing into a Major League Baseball player. And I was now, when you go through 84 and 85, you begin to feel like, okay, I belong here. I'm good enough to stick. And I got to tell you, that's a good feeling. Sure. That's a really good feeling. So I apologize for not giving any details to 85, but you're going to probably get a lot more as we move down the road.
No, that's okay. Well, so let's skip over the 86 season. I did have, you made 26 starts. Again, this season you were a starter, 26 starts, 9-11 record, 3.07 ERA. But I want to jump forward to the 87 season because obviously that's a pivotal moment in your career because you get traded along with several other folks. And so again, we go back to like when you went from Pittsburgh to the Padres, and now you've been in the Padres, the big league club for several years, and now it's a switch to another team. So kind of tell me what the transition was like, because I know the Padres didn't go to the postseason that year. Obviously the Giants did. So you're going from a team that was not going to make the postseason to one that did. So there has to be some kind of feeling of, yeah, I'm going to a successful team, but there also has to be some kind of feelings of, leaving a familiarity and comfortability of being with the Padres for all those years.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that 86 was a really, really hard year for me because at the end of the year, even though I had 26 games under my belt, I was having elbow problems. And so the end of the year came and it couldn't have come sooner so I could heal. And I was at the end of a contract. And I was thinking, I'm going to sign a multi-year deal. I mean, I've had really good years.
Right.
So now it's time to sign another multi-year contract. And they're not even tendering me a guaranteed contract. And they're telling me I've got to make the club out of spring training. Mm-hmm. I've just purchased a home in Scripps Ranch. And I've got a new mortgage. And they're now telling me I got to make the ball club. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I got to go into spring training and I'm no longer solidified. I got to earn a spot on the roster. And I'll never forget, they offered me $575,000, non-guaranteed. And if I make the team out of spring training, then that contract gets guaranteed. Well, I busted my butt and I made the team. And we're now in San Francisco. And Larry Boa is the new manager. And I will never forget, I was at the Westin Hotel and my wife calls and she says, you're not going to believe this, but I just had somebody knock on our door and offer us over $40,000 over what we paid for the house. She said, hun, this might be the best investment we've made in our entire lives. And I said, she goes, what do you think I should do? I said, sell the house, sell it. And she said, what are we going to do? I said, we'll figure that out, but sell the house. And so the short of all of that was, as the season started, we sold the house to that family. We bought a smaller house up in Rancho Bernardo Heights, and we moved into that house thinking we were going to stick in San Diego. I was establishing through networks all this wonderful relationships with people that at the end of my career could help me. I wanted to be like Tony Gwynn, get to the big leagues with the Padres, retire with the Padres. Mm-hmm. That was me. I was loyal to the bone. That's a part of my Enneagram, is that as a 6, I'm a loyal skeptic. And so, man, can I be skeptical? But I'm learning. And so we start the season and I'm not getting along with Larry Boa, but it's not, in a relationship. There's just something there that doesn't feel right. And I start off the season 3-7. We're in Montreal. Clubhouse kid comes up to me and says, hey, Larry Boa wants to see you, Craig Lefferts, and Kevin Mitchell in his office. Now, what the heck's going on? So Kevin, Lefty, and I go into his office and he says, boys, don't even sit down. I'll make this short. You won't want to beat around the bush. You've been traded to the San Francisco Giants, and you need to talk to, the traveling secretary, talk to Johnny Matai, Johnny baby, and find out what the details are for you guys getting to San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And Kevin Mitchell was like, Gary, no way. This is my home. I'm not going anywhere. They ain't trading me because I ain't playing. And Lefty and are like, Boogie, we called him Boogie Bear. I said, Boogie, you got to go with us, man. This is important. Somebody wants you. I know San Diego's your home. I know you're close to your friends. I know this is where you wanted to be. But Kevin, we got to get on that. We got to get in that cab tomorrow morning and we got to get on that plane and we got to, no, Dave, I'm not going. I said, Kevin, you're going. Lefty goes, Kevin, you're coming with us. You wake up. We're going to come knocking on your door to make sure you get up. We're going to get up early enough to catch this cab because this is when our flight's leaving and we're going to San Francisco. And we convinced him to get on the plane with us. He gets on the plane. We go to San Francisco. And I got to tell you, I'm dejected. I've got this plan and I've planned all this stuff out for my future, the network in San Diego, the new move. We'll be able to afford to pay off this house. We won't have any debt. We'll be able to move forward as a family. We love San Diego. We love the Bernardo Heights area. Man, this is awesome. And now all of it is blowing up. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and the Padres don't want me. And I mean, I've given my life to this organization. In the off season, I would go to hospitals, talk to the Kiwanis Club and, the Rotary Club and do all these different things. And we were building strong relationships and now it's all gone. Right. What is going on? And we drive over to Wrigley Field. And back in the day, the clubhouse, it was the weirdest clubhouse, the old clubhouse. It was like a dungeon. And you go over, you climb up these steps to get into the clubhouse, and and then you go in, and it's like real small. The first guy, if I remember correctly, the first guy that greets us is Mike Krukow. Yo, boys, welcome to the Giants. Man, you are key pieces to leading us to the promised land. We're like, whoa. Well, maybe I can forget about San Diego real fast right now. And with that, the clubby comes over to us and he says, hey, Roger Craig wants to see you up in his office. So we walk up another flight of stairs. And we go into the office and they open the door, and it's me, Kevin, and Lefty. And there's Norm Sherry, Al Rosen, and Roger Craig. And they said, gentlemen, sit down. We want to talk to you. So we're in the process of putting together a club that we think can get us to the World Series. And you have just become a big piece of that equation. We can't tell you how excited we are that you're here. We cannot tell you how excited we are. So go strap on that uniform and be a part of something really special. And I was like, okay. When I was playing for the Padres, I thought, man, there ain't no way I want to play in San Francisco. There ain't no way. My wife and I said, man, we would never go to San Francisco. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, this might not be so bad to be in San Francisco. I mean, it's a beautiful city. The stick, I pitched my best games in Candlestick. I mean, this is awesome. So off we go. And we get into the postseason. And we are with a ball club. Talk about chemistry. Talk about a change in managers. I had Norm Sherry as a pitching coach in San Diego. And now he's my pitching coach in San Francisco. If there's anybody in the game that knows Dave Dravecky as a pitcher, it's Storm and Norman. And I loved that man. Absolutely loved him. And he knew me well. He knew the language that I understood when he would come out to the mound, and he would look at me and say just simple things like, hey, get your hand behind your ear. And I knew I could never get my hand behind my ear, but that's what catchers were taught to do. And the reason why is because then they didn't throw from the side with the ball sliding away from the second baseman. It would come in straight. He said, look, you get on top of the ball, Dave, your sinker dives more, your cutter breaks more. You'll be good to go. So hand behind the ear. And it always caused me to get it in the right slot and make the good pitch. And so now Norm was my pitching coach again. And then I had the hum baby. And he's the hum baby of all managers. I mean, this guy loved his players, and he was so endearing and just a great personality. And I love being around him. And so now Kevin's settling in. Lefty's found his role. I'm now turning my career around from 3-7 to, I think, 7-5, that second half. And so all of a sudden things are going great, and we get into the postseason and we're playing the St. Louis Cardinals. And I get game 2 in St. Louis. Oh, baby. So all that to say was we went from very disappointed and frustrated and feeling like we were not wanted and having to make all these adjustments after doing all this work to try and be connected in San Diego, to all of a sudden being extremely excited about the opportunity in front of us, being welcomed by a team that actually traded for us and wanted us and thought we were key pieces to getting them to the promised land, to now being in the promised land.
Yeah.
And I get to go against John Tudor in game 2. And you talk about fun. Every inning I went and stepped out on that mound. Every inning I told myself 0-0 is the score, and your job is to silence the fans. And oh, Kyle, what fun I had that day silencing those fans. As a matter of fact, Well, I'll finish this part of the story and then I'll share real quick with you another story that ties into all of this. We win that game 5-0. I throw a 2-hit shutout. Game 6, I get the start again against John Tudor. And man, I'm fired up. I am so excited about the opportunity, but I know I'm going up against one of the best left-handers in the game.
Right.
I know I'm going up against one of the best teams in all of baseball. I mean, these guys got speed, they got some power, but they know how to play baseball. They know how to play small ball. They know how to take the extra base. They know how to move guys over. And with their speed, they steal like crazy. So they're an incredible challenge, an incredible challenge. And on behalf of that, besides that, I knew many of them. And I used to sit in with baseball chapel with all those guys. And I grew to like them. So now they're on the other side and they're my enemy, you know? And so, you know, there's this incredible dynamic that's taking place. And we end up losing that game 1-0. And I pitched better in that game than I did in game 2. And I'll never forget, fast forward all these years later, my wife and I move to Mesa, Arizona, where we find ourselves today. And I'm out in my garage having a good time. And this guy walks by with the St. Louis Cardinals hat on. And he's going to the mail to pick up his mail. And he stops and he stares at me. And he yells out to me while I'm in the garage. He goes, "Hey, are you Dave Dravecky?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I don't like you." And I saw his Cardinal hat and I go, "Yeah, I know why, because I beat up on your Cardinals." So from that moment on, we have become the dearest friends, and he just lives across the street from me. But he reminds me of those 2 games that I pitched in St. Louis that culminated with, you know, the 2 best games of my career. And even though we lost in going to the World Series, there was so much promise for 1988. So now we're back in the saddle, and Kevin and Lefty and I are really happy.
Okay, so let's go to let's stick with the 87 season, because I know that in the winter, you just in doing some research, you noticed a pea-sized lump between your elbow and shoulder, and then there was nothing found on the MRI. So that was kind of like the first tip, I guess, for you that there might be something wrong, even though doctors and an MRI didn't show it, right?
Yeah. Actually, maybe to others, but not to me. I didn't feel like there was anything wrong. Okay, you know, stuff like this is, you know, not necessarily abnormal, and they can't detect anything from it. So, okay, not a problem. Let's get to spring training and look forward to 1988 because I want to win 20 games. And I mean, that was literally my approach going into 1988. And so, you know, I prepared accordingly. You know, by this time, I was wise enough to know you don't want to kill yourself in the off season and be so burnt out by spring training that you can't get yourself ready for the regular season. And so, you know, I did all that I needed to do to build endurance and strength, and then got to spring training and actually was ready to rock and roll and built my baseball strength during spring training. And by the end of camp, Roger Craig was coming over to me and saying, "Hey, we're giving you the ball on opening day." Now, there's a few things in a pitcher's career that he cherishes. Obviously, Cy Young would be one. A no-hitter would be another. A perfect game would be another. A home run that he gets to hit in the National League would be another. And I got one. and so the other would be giving the ball to me on opening day, which says you're the number 1 guy in the rotation.
Right.
And so Roger Craig calls me over and says, "We're giving you the ball on opening day." And I'm like, oh man, Dodger Stadium. This is going to be huge. And then on top of it, I'm facing Fernando Valenzuela. And it's going to be even bigger with him because at that point in time, I mean, I'm not afraid to admit it, man. He was probably the best left-hander in all of baseball at that point.
Fernando Mania.
Oh, and it was Fernando Mania, man.
Yeah,
it was
I
awesome.
remember.
It was so awesome. I mean, to see the support from his home country and
right.
And from the people that, live there in LA, and, it's a packed house. Unfortunately in LA, it's a packed house by the fourth inning. And then they end up leaving in the seventh. So they don't stick around unless it really means something like the playoffs. But great group of fans, great environment, great atmosphere for opening day, beautiful day. And I get on the mound, Steve Sachs gets to the plate, and I get him out all the time with a cut fastball. So I'm coming in with my cutter. And years later, he told me this story. He said, Dave, on opening day of 1988, I knew that I was going to be the number one hitter in the lineup, and I knew you were going to throw me that cut fastball. So I dug in and I said, I'm going to step into the bucket and I'm going to pull that stinking cutter down the line. And so sure enough, he steps in the bucket and he pulls that son of a gun down the line for a home run. First pitch of the game.
Oh, okay.
And I'm standing on the mound and I'm like, I actually said this to myself, Kyle. Okay, God, is this what the day's going to be like? And then I stepped back off the mound and I thought to myself, wait a minute, that's only one pitch. There's still 9 full innings to play. Why don't you just shut them out from here? We got to score anyway. And so after that hit, 3 hits later, and a complete game, we defeated the Dodgers 5-1. But what was even more important for me personally, now this is personally, as a team, we got the W opening day, great. But I hit a double off of Fernando, right center field. And it felt so good to run to second base and stand on second base. I have no idea if I scored or not, but I got a double off of Fernando. So in relationship to the pea size mass that was there, no feeling, no interference with what was going on. And so going into opening day, no thought about it, just we're normal, we're pitching, everything, it's moving in the right direction with the first win. And the excitement was there for a 21 year. That was it. So,
but then that season, obviously, you have the diagnosis, but before that, and I think I kind of was confused in reading stuff, but then I kind of understood it. That actual season, the shoulder issues that you had were unrelated to the lump, right?
Totally unrelated to the lump.
Okay.
So I started off and and as a result, as we move further into the season, man, for some reason, I'm losing velocity. And there's a pinch, like an impingement of something going on in my shoulder. And I tell Norm, I said, Norm, something's going on. And he said, okay, let's give you a break and then we'll come back. And I came back and we went to the bullpen. He goes, Dave, let the ball go. I said, Norm, I am. He said, there's something going on. And he said, well, the trainers have worked with you and they said everything seems fine. And I said, well, you know what? There's something going on. And so he said, he finally, the trainers came to me, and I remember Mark Laton saying, you know what, we're probably going to have to get an MRI just to see what's going on in there. And sure enough, it ended up being a partially torn bicep tendon. And so Dr. Campbell had to go in and repair the partially torn bicep tendon. And from there, I rehabbed to try and come back. And I still struggled with trying to come back. It just wasn't right. There was something going on. And I just wasn't feeling good. And so what they ended up doing was shutting me down, and I ended up 2-2 that year. And all of a sudden, this lump started showing up on my arm. And now it's more than just a P shape. But at the time, what we were thinking was, I might have torn some muscle fiber in relationship to this bicep tendon tear. And it may have calcified, and it just started calcifying. And so they said, look, we need to get an MRI because now it's half the size of a golf ball. And at one point they were thinking, well, you're not working out. We can't do anything with your shoulder and your arm. It's atrophy. So this is just exposing more of something that's really not that much of a problem, just muscle fiber calcified. We get in the MRI, and I'll never forget, because I mean, I had to shut it down that year, which was frustrating in and of itself.
Right.
Really frustrating. And so I get the MRI at the Cleveland Clinic because at the time we were living and renting in San Francisco. We had owned the home in Bernardo Heights, and we decided, let's sell in Bernardo Heights. And my wife really wanted to move back to our hometown and settle once and for all. So we moved back to Ohio. And so during that 89 season or 88 season, when I couldn't come back and play, and I was getting the MRI, we were actually back in Ohio, and I was at the Cleveland Clinic under the care of Dr. Bergfeld, who was the orthopedic surgeon at the time for the Cleveland Indians. And so he had introduced me to an orthopedic oncologist by the name of Dr. Mushler. And Dr. Mushler was the one overseeing my case. And they did the MRI, and we were in the examining room. And now all of a sudden we're waiting, and we're thinking calcium, fiber tear. It's just a hardened mass, The doctors come down the hallway, the doors open in our examining room about 4 inches. And before they come in, we hear the word cancer. Mm. And we were shocked. And I looked at Jan, and we were like two deer in a headlight. And I looked at her and I said, babe, we need to pray. And I just prayed a very simple prayer, God, whatever it is that's going on, please give us the strength to endure. That's all I ask. And so with that, they opened the door and they confirmed what we heard. You have cancer. And the doctor said, outside of a miracle, you'll never pitch again. And so 1988 was a really rough year, because on October 7th, 1988, which was our 10-year anniversary, I went in for surgery for 10 and a half hours to remove the mass and 50% of my deltoid muscle from my left arm and shoulder. And that was a really, really rough time. Really rough.
Yeah. So you had that surgery and they froze your humerus bone. So I understand, based on that process, it could weaken the bone and make it fragile. So like you said, they said outside of the miracle. So when you're thinking that, I mean, pitching is one thing, but my mom got diagnosed with cancer in 1990, and it was breast cancer. And I remember thinking to myself and my wife, were like, okay, is this a death sentence? Because this is, like, you understand, this was way back when cancer wasn't always curable. So I'm just kind of curious, from your perspective, having my own personal experience with my mom, did you think, this could be a death sentence, or did you think, no, this is treatable? What was kind of going through your mind? Because obviously cancer back then, that could have been a death sentence. So what was going through your mind, Dave?
Well, I have to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know how connected I was with reality. And it had to sink in at first. Mm-hmm. So when I heard, outside of a miracle, you'll never pitch, there was a sense of that, Kyle. Because when you hear the word cancer, you think immediately about your mortality.
Sure.
Okay. So in the examining room, I actually went off to another place. Even though I was there physically, my mind and my soul and my spirit were all in a different place. And I actually thought to myself, if I die from this disease, who's going to marry my wife? And then I thought, God, whoever it is that marries her, will he love my wife and my children as much as I do? And then this is what really freaked me out in that moment. I actually thought, will he love them more? Because I know who I am. And, as a Christian, I wasn't perfect. I had my flaws. I had my sin. I had struggled from time to time in being a good husband. I had struggled from time to time in being a good dad. And all of a sudden, it was like a gut punch, and I wanted another chance. I was like, God, please give me another opportunity to right these wrongs. And what I was asking to right that was wrong was not about baseball. it had to do everything. It had everything to do with relationships,
Right.
and the most important relationships in my life. So in that moment, I had that. But then I went immediately back to reality. And then I thought to myself, you know what? Doctors may say outside of a miracle I'll never pitch again, but I'm going to try and come back. Because I thought to myself in that moment, I've got two choices. I've been diagnosed with cancer. I need to make sure I'm healthy. Need to make sure I can survive this. I don't know what this means. And the doctors were telling my wife, and for some reason, the piece that was the denial piece was, okay, I came face to face with my mortality because of cancer, but I didn't hear what kind of cancer. And so it was two types of cancer that I was diagnosed with. I had a desmoid tumor, which was by nature a benign tumor, but it encapsulated a very aggressive fibrosarcoma. And so I didn't quite get the nuances around that. Right. And so all I'm thinking is, I'm going to get healthy. And then hopefully the doctors say you're good to go to try and come back. And then I'll step into that. And so I said, okay, God, this is the approach I want to take. I'm going to take care of me first, get me healthy, and then do everything I can with the wonderful people you've put in my life to come around me, to take care of me, and to actually help me get to health. And once I get to health, there'll be other people that you bring into my life that help me get to enough strength in my arm to be able to pitch again. And that's kind of where I was at in that moment, because I think in some respects, Jan and I have talked about this over the past couple of years, how oblivious I seemed to be from the seriousness of the cancer that invaded my body.
Interesting.
And especially, and I think, track with me on this a little bit. I think in some degree, some way, that my naivete protected me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't completely oblivious. I wasn't unaware of the seriousness. And maybe that's because my approach was so different because of the transformation that had taken place in my life. And I say that in the context of remaining positive about what I was about to face, not unaware of the seriousness, but being positive about taking it one step at a time and working as hard as I could to come back and play again. Because I was young, I was at the peak of my career. At 31 years of age, most guys are starting to realize I've reached that peak and I'm starting to come down. I was a late bloomer.
Right.
And I'm at the peak of my career, man, and I want to stay and ride that crest for a long time.
There's this whole outside of a miracle, you'll never pitch again. But then there's kind of this transition where I hear like the doctors, Dr. Mushler and Dr. Campbell are saying, you know what, you might be better off if you want to do this, to do it in 1990. So like, I guess giving your arm a chance to heal after the process. So, but it seemed like you were pretty set on doing it in 1989. So kind of tell me about that process of getting back into rehabbing your arm and getting back into pitching condition.
Yes. Well, the caveat that they threw into that was everything's going to be based on how you feel. And so they said, look, I remember Dr. Mushler looking me square in the face and he said, you've got to be very honest with me. Dr. Bergfeld was there too. And he said, you have to be honest with us, because if there's anything that you're feeling along the way, we've got to shelve you. We're not gonna push this, because the reality is that the cryosurgery that we did when we froze the bone, we literally killed your bone, and it has to regenerate and come back. And so that's going to take time. And Dave, there is no baseline with a left-handed pitcher who had cryosurgery that we can gauge this against. You're the guinea pig. And so you're going to have to be really honest. So every step of the way, Kyle, every step of the way, I had absolutely no pain. Now, could I move my arm? No. I mean, when I went into the physical therapist after surgery to get mobility back in hopes that I could play catch with my son in the backyard, because that's what Dr. Musher told me. Outside of, he said, Dave, my greatest hope for you is that you can come back and play catch with your son.
Right.
And so I was all in. The other thing that was important in all of this was the reality of understanding what I was up against. I wasn't living in la la land. I knew that this was going to be really hard, and more than likely it wasn't going to happen. But from my perspective, in my mind and in my heart, I said, I have to try, because I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering if I could have come back because I chose not to. So I stepped into it with that perspective. And in doing so, every step of the way, through therapy back in Youngstown, Ohio, I was passing all these benchmarks along the way. And they finally released me to be able to go to San Francisco. And I wanted to be with the team. And so as a result of being there, I continued to do my work. And I'll never forget, prior to leaving to go to San Francisco, Dr. Bergfeld called me into the office because he was getting the reports from the therapist that I was working with back in Boardman, Ohio. And he said, Dave, according to what we're seeing, and I think they took films to back this up, everything we're seeing with your mobility, with your range of motion, with your strength, and with the healing, is I think we can give you permission when you head out to San Francisco to start the process of trying to come back. I said, okay, that's awesome. That's great news. He said, now remember, anytime you feel pain, you got to shut it down. And we'll be talking to the Palo Alto Sports Clinic and coordinating with them, you know, what went on here and where they need to follow up there. And I got to tell you, Kyle, you know, when I talk about the miracle that happened, look, a real miracle supernaturally would be that my arm grew back. We'd all go, whoa, that's a miracle. But all too often, I think we miss the miracles that are the ones that don't seem so obvious. And for me, the miracle was the people.
Yeah.
From the nurse to Dr. Mushler to Dr. Bergfeld to the trainer that started me in Boardman to Palo Alto Sports Clinic, Dr. Campbell and his team, the orthopedic surgeon there, Larry Brown and his team as the PT, Mark Laton and his team as the trainer for the Giants, my teammates and the support I received from them through all of this. When I got there, Mike Kruko came up to me and he said, Dave, what are you doing here? I said, Krug, I'm here to try to make a comeback. And he told me years later, he said, I walked away and I told some guys, this dude's nuts. He thinks he's going to come back. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But I mean, now that was me. And so going through that process with Larry Brown at the Palo Alto Sports Clinic was the toughest thing I had ever done physically in preparing for baseball. He said, Dave, you're going to have to be really honest with me, and I'm going to take you through some very rigorous testing. And then we're going to do some really rigorous PT. We're going to develop strength without weights, isometrics. I'm going to be pushing against you as you push through range of motion. We're going to go into all those special places in your shoulder and in your arm where most people can't get with weights. And we're gonna do the isometrics, and we're gonna push hard on this. We're gonna do band work. And oh, by the way, I don't want you to think we're not going to be doing any endurance work. Right. I was thinking I was going to get out of the running. And he said, you see that stair climber over there? You're going to live on that thing. And I went, oh, crap. The exercise machine that I hated the most was the stair climber. And I lived on the stair climber. And he'd come over, push it harder, push it harder. I'm like, take a break, Larry. And I go, I know. And the reason why was because he said this to me, Kyle. One of the coolest things, Larry pulled me aside in the beginning. He goes, you know, this is going to be really hard. He said, you're really up against it, but we don't know what's going to happen. But he said, I want you to treat it this way, because this is how I'm going to treat it to help you to actually get back to at least being able to try, because we don't know what the results are going to be. He said, for the next 8 weeks, I want you to be like a prize fighter. And let's just say you're Joe Frazier and you're going up against Muhammad Ali in 8 weeks. And you've got to do everything you can to get your body in shape to fight the greatest of all time. And he said, we're not going to do it once, but we're going to do it twice. We're going to do double sessions. You're going to double up on everything because we need to maximize these 8 weeks. I said, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. And man, it was intense. But then one day he got permission. He said, we're going outside. So what are we doing outside? He said, we're going to start throwing a tennis ball. I said, what? He goes, yeah, we're going to start throwing a tennis ball. So I'll never forget this, Kyle. The very first time I grabbed a tennis ball with my glove and I went into my delivery and I threw the ball, he stopped. He goes, oh my gosh. He goes, okay, do this again. And I reared back and I threw the ball. He goes, Dave. He goes, do you realize what's happening? I said, well, I just threw the ball. He goes, no. It's like your mechanics. Nothing's changed.
Wow.
You just lost 95% use of your deltoid muscle. Nothing's changed. I remembered that day because he was so excited. And I'm like, well, this is what I do. This is normal. He says, no, you don't get it. It's not supposed to be normal. I'm supposed to help you get back to normal. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, God, thank you. Thank you for a milestone here that gives me encouragement. We went from the tennis ball to the football. Now I'm throwing spirals with the football. No stress on the arm as I'm throwing something heavier, a heavier object. And it just continued to progress. And as it progressed, I was showing up at the baseball field. Now I'm playing catch with the guys. What is this guy doing? This is nuts. And so one day, and I'm over a period of time, this is probably a couple of weeks. I'm going out and I'm playing catch in my uniform and I'm tossing with Atlee Hammaker or anybody that wants to, toss with me. And I'm struggling because it feels like I just can't get anything on it. Nothing. And I'm really frustrated. I'm like, man, I want to get on the mound and start throwing, but they're not letting me. So one day, a couple of days pass, and one day I'm in the clubhouse and I look at Atlee and I said, hey, let's go play catch. He goes, okay. He says, I'll go play catch, but I know you've been frustrated because I've been telling him of my frustration. He goes, I want you to do something. I said, what's that? I said, when we start playing catch and you get loose, I want you to air it out. I said, what? He goes, yeah. What do you got to lose? It breaks again? You can't throw? Nobody's expecting you to do this. So sooner or later, you got to break through the fear. You got to find out. So why don't you do it today? So we got out there and I got warmed up and I took my crow hop and I let it fly. And something popped in my arm. And I was like, what was that? I said, Atlee, come here. He said, what's wrong? I said, something just popped in my arm. He goes, well, does it hurt? I said, no. He said, well, let's keep playing catch. So he goes back and I reach back and I throw again. And there's freedom. I'm like, oh my gosh, that felt good. I'm going to throw a couple more like that. He goes, Dave, there's more on the ball. I said, well, come in closer. I'm going to see if I can throw it hard. So he comes in closer and I'm popping his glove. He goes, dude, this is good. This is really good. So I said, okay, I'm going to go tell Norm. So I ran to Norm. I said, Norm, I want to get on the mound right now. Give me a catcher. I want to get on the bump. Something happened. I'm freed up. I want to play catcher. I want to be on the mound and I want to work out. He's like, no. There's protocol. He said, I'm glad you're feeling good, but calm down. Let's rest and see how you feel after a day's rest. And so then everybody kicks in to taking care of me, which was smart because I was ready to start. I was ready to put my uniform on, go between the lines. And that wasn't going to happen. But the long and short of it was, in relationship to all of that, I progressed from that point to simulated games, from, bullpen sessions to all of a sudden, we're thinking about, let's get you in the minor leagues. There's been no pain. The therapy continues. And now all of a sudden they're saying, okay, we're going to let you go pitch down in the minor leagues, and we're going to give you a 75 pitch limit with the Class A team, San Jose Giants. They're over in Stockton playing the Ports. And that's going to be your first comeback, July 23rd. Never forget. So I get on the mound with these young kids. I'll never forget this kid, Fernandez. Danny Fernandez was the catcher that day. And I don't remember, as you know, as I've shared my story, I don't remember very many details. But the ones I do remember are profound to me. Danny was in the bullpen, and I went like this with my glove, which is the cutter.
Right.
And he goes, "What's that?" I said, "It's my cutter." He goes, "What's the cutter?" I said, "Well, let me show you by throwing an easy one." And I just reared back and I threw him a nice easy cutter. He goes, "What the heck was that?" I said, "That's my cut fastball." He goes, "Okay, show me what it really looks like." So I did. And he caught it. It just moved like 2 or 3 inches, but he goes, "Dave, that's awesome. It looked like a fastball." So I said, "Yeah, that's what it's supposed to do, Danny." So we get into the game, and he and I are having so much fun, man. I mean, first inning goes by, second inning goes by, third inning goes by. Now it's a doubleheader, so we're in the 7th inning. I've got 75 pitches, 2 outs, and 2 strikes on the batter. And guess who comes to the mound to get me out? Todd Oates. He said, "Dave, you've hit your pitch limit." I said, "Todd, no, I haven't. It's only 74. He goes, "No, I got 75. I said, "Todd, I don't care what you got. I got one more pitch to get this kid out, and then I'm going to be done, and we'll move on to the next game." He said, "Dave, I can't do that. You're coming out of the game." I said, "Todd, I ain't coming out of the game." I said, "You're going back and sit down, and when they ask how many pitches I threw, if you've got to tell them the truth, then I'll tell them I overrode you because I wanted to win this game." He said, "Okay. All right. Don't you get me in trouble. You better get him out on this pitch." Sure enough, I did. And I ended up throwing 76 pitches, which were 75 for Todd. And we won that game. I think it was 4-3. I'm not quite sure, but I think it was by 1 run. And on one of the plays, Todd had to write in the report that I actually dove to catch a bunt that was in the air to make a play to get a force out, because I caught it and wheeled and got the guy forced from getting off the base. And Al Rosen called and just through Todd reamed me out. "You you tell that kid he doesn't die for anything." I was just playing the game. Just playing the game. So the next start, so much fun. The next start, I end up going up against the Reno Class A team for the San Jose Giants. And I told the guys before the game, if we win this game, dinner's on me. And we were staying at the Peppermill Inn, the casino there in Reno. I go out, we win that game. I throw 9 innings, a complete game, 93 pitches. There's something with 93 because it was 2.93 in those 2 seasons, 93 pitches in that game, 93 pitches in the game that followed, and 93 pitches in my comeback game, which is absolutely phenomenal. If I'm correct. But that's my recollection. So anyway, we beat them 6-3. I throw a complete game. I stay under the 100 pitch limit that they gave me. And I ended up buying dinner, which I thought would be for my teammates, but it was their wives and families and girlfriends. So when my wife got that credit card bill, it was pretty high. And she was like, "What did you do?" And I said, "Well, I made a promise and I got to stick to my promise." But she was great with it. The next day, the next round, they bumped me up to AAA, and Kevin Bass is on a rehab program with the Astros, and it's the Astros AAA team, Tucson, the Toros. Yep. And so I go there. They don't give me a pitch limit. We win 3-2. I get Kevin Bass out twice. He hits a couple of really hard ground balls, but I get him out, and I realize, okay, I've thrown another 93 pitches, complete game, 3 wins, all complete games, all within the pitch limit. And I'm thinking, I'm ready for the big leagues. This is enough. After the game, we're in the clubhouse, and Bob Kennedy, Terry Kennedy's dad, is Al Rosen's assistant general manager. And he comes up to me after the game. He goes, "Dave, great job tonight, man. You've been pitching so well. But I just got off the phone with Al, and he said, you know what? Unfortunately, you're not ready to come up. He wants you to get at least one more start." I said, "Bob, I don't need another start." I said, "I'm ready to go." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, man. I don't write the news. I just bring it, And so basically, I'm telling you, he doesn't want you pitching in the big leagues until you get at least one more start under your belt." I said, "Bob." He goes, "No, I'm sorry, Dave." And he turns around and starts walking away. And he takes about 10 steps, turns around and looks at me and goes, "Just kidding." Go, "What? You gotta be kidding me." He goes, "Yeah, I got off the phone with Al. He said, tell Dave he's pitching on August 10th, 1989. And so I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Bob, you're so bad. You are so bad." So, and so all of this is around my health. Okay. You asked the question around my health and around coming back. And Dr. Mushler encouraging maybe you need to hold off until 1990. And all of them saying, if you have any pain, you got to let us know. So with that, the reality was there was no pain, nothing. Feeling as strong as I've ever felt. And now I'm ready for my comeback game. And I get to San Francisco. And Kyle, I got to tell you, none of those guys thought in a million years I'd be walking into that clubhouse with my uniform on, getting ready to start against the Cincinnati Reds on that day. And we're in the pennant race. We're in it, man. And so August 10th, I'm like, "Oh, I'm back in the big leagues." And that day, I'll never forget waking up. And Jan and I, we don't do this very often. It's not to say that we don't pray, but we don't pray very often together. Mm-hmm. And it's just, she spends a lot of time talking to God in her quiet space, and I do. But in this moment, we both were in the bedroom, and we knelt down on either side of the bed where we slept. And we reached across the bed and grabbed our hands. And we just said, "God, thank you so much. We don't even understand how this has all happened. But we know that you have put some really special people in our lives for us to be here on our knees this day. And we want to thank you for them, for using them to help us, to help me heal, so that we can have this experience today." And I was overwhelmed by that. It was very short, very simple prayer that the two of us ended up sharing together. And then I got in the car and I drove to the ballpark like I always do prior to a start, to get there early enough just to get into the rhythm of the day. And on the cassette in the car was a tape that was a Maranatha music, Christian, long time ago, Christian band that did worship music for the church. And the song that was playing was "Give Thanks with a Grateful Heart." And I thought to myself, how appropriate is this? Right. I'm just on my knees with my wife, thanking you. And now you give me a song that I can sing that says thank you. And so I had the biggest chuckle all the way in. I just kept hitting repeat and just kept the song going. I get to the ballpark. I share it with Allie Hammaker, Scotty Garrelts, Britt Butler, some of the guys that were in chapel all the time. I got to the ballpark and I didn't want anything different, Kyle, nothing different, because I'm not that guy. I don't go into my game day, game face mantra. My game face and my game day is keep it as normal as the other 4 days. Sure. And so when I went in, I said hello, we talked. Everybody's like, whoa. They're looking at me like, he's actually going to pitch today. This is going to be really interesting. You know, we got to see what he's got. And so they're all really grateful to see me there. And they're so supportive. And they're like, man, it's so good to see you. So good to have you in this clubhouse. And I got to tell you, all of it, from Al Rosen being in there, to the manager, to the coaches, to, you know, the traveling secretary, to everybody that was involved with this. Dirk Smith, who was the traveling secretary, to Mark Laton, everybody. They were all so wonderful to me that it was motivation. It was this, they were inspiring me. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Here I am. And I'm getting ready to pitch on August 10th. And so my normal routine was, up until about 15 minutes before I was to go out to the bullpen, I would get in my locker and I would go through my routine. And prior to that, I would go see Mark Laton, get a normal rub down, have him put the Tiger Balm on my arm or whatever it was that heated it up and got the blood flowing. And I did all that, went through my weightlifting routine because I loved getting a pump before I went out and pitched. I felt stronger, even though I didn't throw harder. You know, it was one of those deals. Psychologically, you think you might be able to throw harder, but you just feel stronger. That's all it is. And so anyway, there I am at my locker. And I just said, okay, God, I am really excited about this day. Thank you so much. I just want to go out and I just want to enjoy this to the full. And I want to play for you. And as I play for you, I want to be able to play for all those people that made it possible for me to be there, right, as a way of saying thank you. And so I got dressed. I went down to the bullpen and, you know, I started playing catch and warming up a little bit. And then I got on the mound with TK because my warm up, I mean, I've watched Clayton Kershaw warm up. Man, the amount of time he takes to warm up, I'd have been so exhausted I wouldn't have been able to start the game. I'd already been done. And so my routine was very fast, 5 minutes of 5 sprints and some long toss and then get on the mound and go. And so I get on the mound. So I'm done with all of that. And I go to get on the mound and there's 75 people who've run down to the bullpen to capture this. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? I'm just pitching a game. I mean, I'm like, you are so naive. This is, Dave, this is big to these folks. Yeah. I know it means something to you, but you got to realize what you are about to experience. And so in that moment, I looked to Terry Kennedy, who was down at the end, getting ready to catch me. And I grabbed my shirt and I started going like this with my heart because it was pounding out of my chest. And he looks at me and goes, me too. I go, well, if you're scared and I'm scared, how are we going to do this? So we start warming up. And I mean, I go through my normal routine. I'm Norm Sherry standing there. 2 fastballs in the windup, 2 4-seamers in the windup, 2 sinkers in the windup, 2 cutters in the windup. And you get in the stretch, do the same thing, go back in the windup, do the same thing. Last pitch, 3-2, bases loaded. Barry Bonds at the plate, throw a strike, and right down the middle, get your strike. And that was it. Now it's done. Probably threw no more than 30 pitches, 35 pitches. Norm's always freaking out. He goes, are you sure you don't need more? I said, Norm, I'm as loose as I'm going to get, man. She said, okay, here we go. So we walked down. Oh, gosh, it was just overwhelming. The people were standing. I came out and they gave a standing ovation when I started warming up. And then I went down into the dugout, and Terry sits next to me and he goes, "You ready to go?" And I said, "Yeah, man, let's do this." And Hum Baby came over, patted me on. Everybody came over, patted me on the back. Let's go get him. And so we go running out there. And I'm standing on the mound. And as I'm standing there, the people stand up again and they start cheering. And so I tip my hat to thank them. And I step off the mound and I just went, "Oh my gosh, this." And I turned around and I said, I saw "Welcome back, Dave." I was like, "Lord, this is incredible. This is amazing." So I step back up on the rubber. And before I get started, I just said, "God, thank you so much for giving me another chance to experience my little boy's dream of being once again a major league pitcher." The umpire said, "Play ball." And I threw the first pitch, and it was a ball, because I wanted to make sure that that pitch was thrown out of the game, and we were able to save it. And unfortunately, I don't know where that ball's at today, Kyle. I really don't, which is very unfortunate, but I don't know where it's at. And so anyway, the game proceeds, and I mean, 7 innings of one-hit baseball. I mean, I'm shocking everybody, including myself. And it's just been so much fun. I mean, I am loving every minute of it. I go out in the 8th inning, and I end up, I don't know what ends up happening, but Luis Quinones, I think, is the kid at the plate. He hits a home run, and the score is 4-3. I get out of the inning. I go 8 strong innings, and I think I end up throwing 93 pitches in 8 strong innings. And then they bring in Steve Bedrosian. And this is the coolest story. Donnie Robinson's on the club at the time. He's in the bullpen, along with Bedrosian. I'll never forget this. Years later, Donnie tells the story, and he's a great storyteller. He tells the story. He goes, "Draveck," he goes, "when you came out in the 8th and they had to get somebody up to come in and close the game out, I'm sitting down there and I'm going, don't you dare call my name. I do not want to be the guy that messes this up for Dravecky." And Bedrosian's sitting right next to him, and he's going, "Oh my gosh, they're going to call me." He says, "I better not screw this up." And so Bedrosian goes out and slams the door in the last inning, and we win 4-3. And the Giants end up going to the pennant that year, to the World Series. And even though we lost, we won that division by 2 games. And my record, and I only pitched 2 games, was 2-0. And so I'd like to think I played just a little piece of an entire 162 game schedule in those 2 games, but just an amazing experience that day. Yeah,
it's an amazing story, just an absolute amazing comeback. So that's obviously the joyous, the happy time. You've worked your butt off. You've gotten back to this point where you strive to be since you were a kid. You know, my dream is being a Major League Baseball. So many kids' dreams, and you're living that dream again, coming back after this incredible odds against you. So then 5 days later, you go out, you're pitching against the Expos. You know, you've gone 6 innings, but there was a moment in that 5th inning where you felt something. So kind of tell me what it was that you felt. There was obviously something different that you noticed.
Yes, but throughout my career, I've always had twinges.
Okay.
And so it wasn't something that caught me off guard. It was okay, you know, because you see pitchers always doing this, and they're doing this, and they're kind of moving their arms around, and they're feeling those twinges. They're trying to break them free or whatever they're doing with it. Well, that was what I felt. I felt this slight twinge, and I just went, "Oh, okay, no problem. It's not bothering me now." So it was just an instant of a twinge. And I was like, "Okay, let's get back out there." Done with the 5th. I got to go back out for the 6th. And then all of a sudden, you know, I just started having some problems location wise. I don't know why. I wasn't feeling any pain, but I think I got an out. I may have walked someone, I don't know. But I remember hitting Andres Galarraga. And it wasn't an obvious hit, like I was throwing at him. I just hit him. And Timmy Raines comes to the plate. Terry Kennedy gives me the sinking fastball sign. And I rear back to throw the fastball. And my arm just exploded in my left ear. And all I could think about in that moment was, I've got to feel if the bone broke through, because I don't like the sight of blood. I pass out at blood. So I grabbed my arm going down. And if you've seen the video, I slammed my head on the mound and rolled over to my back and just held onto my arm. And when I touched my arm, there was no bone. And I was like, oh, okay. But I couldn't breathe. I was holding my breath. And Will Clark came over me. Dave, you've got to breathe. Breathe, Dave, through the nose, out the mouth. Mark Laton comes out, through the nose, out the mouth, through the nose, out the mouth. I wrote in my book, and I felt bad about this, but I wrote in the book Comeback that Mark Laton was telling me to breathe through the nose and out the mouth. And it felt like I was a woman in pregnancy, getting ready to give birth, which is the breathing pattern that you give your wife, Right. And so when I said that, I didn't take into consideration the sensitivity around someone who was trying to help me, And so we had a really nice conversation post-career about that and how he felt. And actually, it was really cool. It was really cool. So we got through that. But there I was trying to breathe, and finally, I kind of caught my breath and started going through the breathing process. And I was numb. And they put me on a gurney and wheeled me off. And I'll never forget this, Kyle. While I was in the clubhouse, I mean, there were guys from the Expos bench that came running over to see if I was okay. Mikey Fitzgerald, who was catching in that game at the time, who was the nephew of my center fielder in AA ball in Amarillo, Texas, so I knew Mikey really well. He came over with tears on his face, in his catcher's uniform, gives me a hug, kisses me on the cheek, says, "I love you, I'm praying for you," and runs out. In the meantime, Bob Nepper is standing next to Al Rosen, and he looks at Al with all these guys around me and says, "Al, before they take him into the ambulance, is it okay if I pray for him?" And Al said, "Sure, Bob, go right ahead." And so Bob prayed a very simple prayer for me, very short, and they wheeled me off and took me into the ambulance and rushed me off to the hospital in Montreal, where I would have x-rays, and they would confirm that it was a spiral oblique. And the doctor gave me a packet of painkillers. And I remember Duffy Jennings, who was on the staff at the time, was with me. And we got out the hospital, got back into the cab, and I was now in a sling with a plastic brace around my arm. And they took me back to the hotel room. And on the way, it was August 15th. They obviously had not fixed the potholes in Montreal on the streets, because I swear that cab hit every one of them. And I'm bouncing and just going, "Duffy, oh, it's just horrible." And so anyway, we get back to the hotel room, and Duffy checks me in. And then the team starts coming home after the game. We won the game. Jeff Brantley got the save. And all of a sudden, these guys are a couple guys knocked on the door, and I'm like, "Okay, I got to get up and let you in, but let's just leave the door open." And so Atlee Hammaker comes in. "Are you doing okay?" Scotty Urelts comes in. Brett Butler comes in. JB, Jeff Brantley comes in. And they're all sitting there with me. Greg Litton was on the team at the time. He's sitting, and we're all sitting there. And now all the guys are coming in. Everybody is coming in to check on me to see if I was okay. I was overwhelmed by that. Roger Craig, all of them. They were all there. Al Rosen, "Are you okay, Dave?" Mark Laton came in. "Hey, You need anything, you know where I'm at, you know? And so once everybody had funneled through, the guys stayed in my room, those 5 guys. And I looked at them and I said, guys, you know me. Boogie Bear gave me the nickname Snacks. I missed the spread after the game. Can somebody please go get me food? And Scotty Girls goes, I'll be right back. He comes back about 30 minutes later. He got a cab to Burger King. I swore between 5 of us, we had at least a dozen Whoppers and bags of French fries that you couldn't count. And as he came in with his hands full of giant bags, and we had a feast on my bed, sitting there. And Kyle, it was the most bizarre thing because it was joyful. And it's like, this shouldn't be like this. But we all looked at each other and go, do you realize what's going on here? You weren't supposed to do this. You did it and got to the mountaintop, and now you've got a broken arm. There's something so much bigger that's going on in this than the game of baseball. And we were all so excited. The excitement was overwhelming. I mean, it wasn't around those teammates. These were all my chapel buds. And they were kind of getting, where I was itching. They were kind of getting it. And so we started carrying on conversation about this, about, okay, so where's God in the middle? What do you think is going on? I said, I have no clue. But there's one thing I do know. And Bob Nepper was in the room. And I said, Bob, do you realize what you said to me 5 hours before the game? He goes, yeah. It's not the miracle of the comeback, Dave. It's the miracle of salvation that occurred in your life in Amarillo, Texas. When you became a follower of Jesus and God is giving you a platform through baseball for you to share his love with those who heard. I said, yeah, I have no clue what that means. But Bob, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And so we're all sitting there talking, and finally everybody's like, look, we're tired. We got to keep playing baseball. You got to get up early to get to the hospital in San Francisco to see the docs there. So, you need to get to bed. And if you need any help, let us know. And I told Scott and Natalie, because I was closest to those guys, hey, if you wouldn't mind coming down about 7 a.m., I'm going to need help getting in the shower. And I'm going to need help making sure I don't fall, because God forbid I would fall and do more damage.
Right.
So they both came down the next day. But that night before I went to bed, Scotty looked at me before I left and he said, hey, do you realize ever since you've been here, you haven't had one pain med? I said, I know. This is really weird, dude. You think you might want to take one just so you can get a good night's sleep? I said, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So I took one. The door knocks, 7 a.m. They get me up, help me get my shower, and off I go on the airplane to fly back to San Francisco to see the doctors there. I get to San Francisco, and I'll kind of close with this piece. I get to San Francisco to the airport. And I can't remember, I think Jan met me there. And all of a sudden, there are a ton of people at the airport, to the point where they've actually set up a podium for me to speak to them. And so I just said a few words. And from there, we had to get about our business and go to see the doctor and do all the follow-up stuff. I was overwhelmed with the support of the community of San Francisco, my teammates, the front office, everybody that was involved, from ushers when I was at the ballpark to, fans that were at the airport. I mean, Kyle, it was overwhelming. It really was. And to this day, I'm extremely grateful and will never forget the kind of support that Jan and I received and continue to receive during that whole time, because for the last 15 years, I've served as an ambassador in street clothes instead of my Giants uniform, working with the Giants and representing the organization in the Bay Area. And it has been one of the joys of my life to be able to um, tell the Giants story and what it means to be a member of the Giants family to all those fans that are family.
So just a couple quick things, Dave, I wanted to follow up on. So it was a few months later in October, game 5, NLCS against the Cubs. And I know I read somewhere where you were talking to Tom Seaver, who was working for NBC in the dugout. And
Yes.
he talked to you about, if you guys won, would you go out and celebrate? So kind of tell me that story and then what happened after.
Yeah. So that's exactly what happened. Tom Seaver was sitting next to me. He was getting ready for the postseason or for the post game interviews and all that good stuff. And he said, man, if you guys end up winning this, are you going to go out and celebrate? I said, Tom, are you kidding me? With all I've been through, I'm not going to go out and celebrate. You better believe I'm going to go out and celebrate. The only problem is in the background, as my wife just walked past me, all I could hear were her words, if you guys win, don't you go out there and get hurt. And sure enough, we win, and I go racing out there, and I'm one of the first to congratulate those guys. And I get smoked from behind, right in my arm. And I literally almost dropped to the ground. My knees buckle. And Mark Laton happened to be right next to me and grabs me. He goes, are you okay? And I said, oh, I just got hit in my arm. And he goes, you're white as a ghost. We got to get you into the training room. I felt so bad because I took him away from the celebration. We go in the training room and Dr. Campbell comes running in. Are you okay? Are you okay? I said, yeah, I got hit in the arm, Doc. He goes, no, we're going to have to get another x-ray, Dave. I go, I know. And I looked at him. I said, look, he said, here's some pain meds. I said, look, the boys are out there celebrating. Is it okay, even though I take these pain meds, is it okay if I have a glass of champagne to celebrate with them? He said, sure, go right ahead. Don't worry about it. Somebody else will be driving anyway. So I had a glass of champagne and I went out and celebrated with as many guys as I could. And they're all like, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm going, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'm good. And that's the story that I usually don't like to tell because I was so stupid to go out there and celebrate in the middle of that. But then again, I just think that speaks to how much I cared about being a part of that team.
Right.
They were my boys.
Right. And then I was trying to find through my research, Dave, trying to find information because that was the 89 World Series, the earthquake series. So where were you when all of that happened? Because obviously you had been hurt with the Cubs game and then you guys play in the World Series. So where were you in relation to when the earthquake happened?
The first 2 games, I was actually at the ballpark.
Okay.
I wanted to be a part of the team. I was in uniform. And so celebrating with them, hopefully through a victory in the World Series, was really important to me. The only problem was that at the time when Dr. Campbell took the x-rays and realized that I had broken my arm again, right above the original break, I had a complete sever of the bone that I needed to sleep in a lazy boy chair until that started to take because they couldn't cast me because the bone needed to be suspended in air and through gravity heal straight. And so I had to sit upright when I slept. So someone donated a lazy boy chair to us to be able to use. And after the first 2 games and the earthquake, as those 10 days that we were off during that period of time kept being counted off, I was not doing well physically. I was really hurting to the point where Jan said, honey, I really want to call and talk to Al Rosen and see if he'll give permission for you to go home. Because by that time we had finished our home in Ohio and we were making that home. And so she called Al. Al gave permission. And right before game 3, we left to go back to Ohio. And I finished the World Series out watching in Ohio. And then subsequent from there, I had communications with Al Rosen and the ball club about my time with the organization. And Al was gracious enough to offer me a contract for 1990. And he said, look, we'll give you a base salary of, X number of dollars, and then we'll write a bunch of incentives in there if you can come back and perform so that we can get you to where you're worth. And I said, Al, I really appreciate the offer, but I don't think it's fair to you, the ball club, or the fans, because I know it's not going to happen. And so I'm going to have to decline your offer. And so by right around Thanksgiving of 1989, I announced my retirement. And so that's where I was. I was in Ohio watching the final two games, and actually not as excited this time to get the loser's ring. Yeah. Really wanted to see a World Series W.
Of course.
But as a caveat, to the I guess the praise and respect of the San Francisco Giants that I have for this organization. I started working for them in 2011 as an ambassador, and in the spring of 2013, my wife and I got called into the office of my boss, Mario Aliotto, and he and Larry Baer ended up giving us the 2012 World Championship ring with my name engraved on it. Wow. And then fast forward 2015, they did the same thing for the 2014 World Series. So now I possess 2 losers rings that I'm really proud of and 2 winners rings that I'm really proud of. So it's just been that's why it's been so good, such a privilege to be a part of such an amazing organization. Wow. They love their players well, they care for their alumni, and it's just really cool to be a part of their family.
That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. All right, so we're going to wrap up here, Dave. So let's just talk about, so the final diagnosis a month later. So did you retire before the diagnosis of the next round of cancer, or was that before that?
Yes, I retired before the diagnosis of the next round. And then in January, I was re-diagnosed with the return of the cancer. So they went in and did more surgery, radiation therapy. And then the cancer came back again, had to go through more surgery, which this time was a flap because they had removed so much tissue around the humerus bone. They had to go into my lat muscle, sever it at the base, pull it up, wrap it around my bicep, where my bicep would have been, just to fill in so that there was tissue there to protect the bone. And then I had more radiation treatments. And then following that, I ended up with a staph infection that lasted for about 10 months, where at 7 a.m. in the morning and 7 p.m. at night, they administered intravenous vancomycin antibiotics. That didn't heal because the medicine couldn't get to the area. And so as a result, the doctors became very concerned about the staph infection. And on June 6th or 7th, I went to Sloan Kettering for an evaluation. And that's when I was told it was time to remove the left arm and shoulder. And so on the 18th of June of 1991, because of the staph infection, they didn't want it to take over my body and then take my life. They removed my left arm and shoulder. What's really interesting in all of this, Kyle, is when they removed it, they found 7 milliliters around the ulnar nerve of cancer. And so actually removing the arm, even though Dr. Brennan, at the time, the chief of surgery at Sloan Kettering, said it was a barbaric act, for me, he saved my life. So, from that standpoint and from my perspective, what he did wasn't barbaric at all. It was the appropriate and necessary thing to do so that I would be here today.
Okay. So, I mean, just hearing you say it and talking about it, I mean, there just has to be so many range of emotions. And I read where you said you went through 30 months of counseling, anger issues, depression. I mean, that just seems like so normal to experience all of those emotions after having something. I mean, the one thing that made you famous that made you all of this money, that made you everything, your career. It doesn't define you because I know your Christianity and all that defines you,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
professionally, it defines you. The
Sure.
one thing, the item that did all of that is now gone. And I'm like, just the whole, the juxtaposition of all of it. So tell me about that after the surgery and getting the arm removed and the shoulder removed, just the processing of that, Dave, because I know it had to be a traumatic experience.
Yeah, it really was, Kyle. And I think prior to the amputation, there was a lot of struggle post career,
Sure.
struggling with my identity, struggling with the pain of the arm, struggling with all the different things I had to go through, the recovery from surgery after surgery, the radiation therapy that did so much damage to my arm, the frustration in all of that, and not knowing how to manage my frustration,
Mhm.
and how to, more importantly, how to articulate what was going on inside. Because I'm supposed to present this image that says I'm handling it well, and there was an expectation of presenting that image and handling it well. And there was the frustration of behind the scenes being not being able to deal with it well, and then going out and traveling and telling my story and having to be on for all those people. So this was just prior to the amputation.
Mhm.
So when we got to the amputation, and that was a ding on me emotionally, it was a ding on me physically, and it was a ding on me spiritually. I mean, I struggled in all three areas.
Sure.
And then the amputation comes, and I think to myself, if I get rid of my arm, I get rid of all my problems. And life's going to get better. And for the first 3 weeks after that, it was good. And during that time, Jan had started counseling because she was clinically depressed, and I was going with her. And as we moved down that road away from my surgery, all of a sudden, I was going through significant struggles. And the arm's gone, and the bad stuff hasn't gone. My identity is still being threatened. If I can't be a baseball player, then who am I? What can I do to provide for my family? And and in the midst of that, I was struggling with anger issues, not being able to talk about my pain, which led through that to eruptions of anger. It led to verbal abuse, and it was the most difficult of times. And the beauty of my faith is understanding this one truth. On my worst day, I know that I'm loved more than I can comprehend. And so when I saw that in my wife, who put up with so much, I was so grateful that God used her to display his grace on someone who was really struggling. And in the midst of that struggle, when we finally got through the 18 months of counseling, and it was extremely helpful because not only was Jan healing, talking about what was going on deep down inside, but we both knew this was a process of healing.
Right.
And that was very important to be mindful of. But when that 18 months came and we got released from that phase of counseling, we decided to move to Colorado from Ohio. And in moving to Colorado, we wanted a fresh start. And what was really interesting, Kyle, was when we got to Colorado, Jan had received a manuscript from a Christian counselor by the name of Gary Oliver, who was writing on men and their anger. And he wanted Jan to endorse the book. How ironic is that?
Yeah.
And when she gets it, she realizes he's only 30 minutes from our house. And she goes, "Hey, would you like to go to Gary Oliver to deal with your anger?" And at that time, I looked at her and I said, "Babe, I do not like being like this. Absolutely, let's go." And the gift that my wife gave me during that time was that she went to every counseling session that I was in to learn about my anger, why it was there, and how to help me deal with it moving forward. Those 12 months were a gift to me. If there is any man that hears this and is willing to admit that they have an anger problem, I could not encourage them more, if they continue to struggle with it, to go to a counselor and get the tools that you need that will help you deal with that anger. I actually wrote about the tools that Gary Oliver gave me in The Worth of a Man, a book that came out in 1994 that is still in print that you can get on Amazon. And I specifically state the key things that helped me to work through my anger, that came as a result of 12 months of counseling and diving in to those deep-rooted issues that were at the core of this thing that I couldn't deal with and that I needed to learn to deal with. So absolutely amazing.
That was the last thing I wanted to talk about, is you and Jan's work with endurance and kind of, having your experience and what you're doing to help others who are going through similar experiences.
Yeah. And I think the easiest and simplest way to describe that, Kyle, is that as we went through it, Jan made a statement. I want to make sure when we get on the other side of this, that women know they're not alone, because this was a lonely journey for us, Dave. Right. And as a result of all the people that were reaching out to us, sharing their stories during that period of time, we started Endurance with Jan and Dave Dravecky to reach out through our story and share those resources with them to encourage them on their journey through pain and suffering, and to help answer the question, where is God when it hurts? So if people are interested in going to our website to receive that gift, it's an encouragement gift box that is simply to help you understand where God's at when it hurts, and it's endurance.org. And we've been doing that now for 33 years, Kyle, and we're averaging about 1,300 families a year that get our gift box. And we count it a privilege to walk alongside people just to help them know they are loved and prayed for by someone they don't even know. And hopefully they can be connected with God on that journey to find hope in Him and the strength to endure that journey.
Yeah, well, I'll include a link to the website in the description. So again, Dave, I really appreciate your time and sharing your story. It's an incredible story of inspiration, overcoming tragedy, and just, it's such an amazing story. And I'm so honored that you took the time to share it and talk to me about it. So again, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me, Dave. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck in the future. And hopefully we can talk later down the road.
Yeah, that'd be great, Kyle. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate your time, bud.
Okay, bud. Take care.
Take care.